Bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum. Hey, everybody, come on in. Come on in. Can you smell the coffee brewing? I think you can. Yeah, we're so accustomed to having the simultaneous sip that you can almost taste it minutes before it happens. It is so good. And what do you do to enjoy the simultaneous sip? Well, you don't just sit there. No, you don't just watch it happen. No, that would be wrong. You join in. It's called the simultaneous sip, and all you need is a cup or mug or a glass, a tank or chalice or stein, a canteen, jar or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. Join me now for the unparalleled pleasure, the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It's called the simultaneous sip. Are you ready? Are you ready for this? You better be ready. Go. Yeah, now if you enjoyed that live, you know what the feeling is, don't you? Yeah, you do. Savor it. Savor it. Okay, now we can move on. Gotta stop and smell the coffee. That's just good advice. Well, all right. Apparently 2/3 of voters or citizens, I don't know, maybe it's voters, like Biden's COVID plans. So that includes 1/3 of Republicans say he's doing okay in COVID. I'll give you my opinion. He's doing okay. I think he's doing okay. If I had to grade Biden for COVID response, pretty good. Now, there's still things that he needs to do better. But here's something he did really well. Now, I know some of you aren't going to like this because I know the nature of my audience, but I need you to get used to this so it doesn't bother you in the future. When Biden does something right, I'm going to call it out. All right? I'm not about just criticizing him for things I don't like. So I'm going to do the same treatment that I gave Trump, but I'll do it for Biden. And he's about to do something that's really, really smart, if he pulls it off. And that is this. As you know, teachers' unions are the biggest threat to this country. But the federal government doesn't want to exert, direct control over unions because that's politically bad, as well as, the country isn't ready for that. You don't want your federal government to put a boot on a union. It's just not a good look. But the school unions are the biggest problem in the country because they're keeping the teachers out of schools, which keeps the schools closed. So Biden is in favor of reopening the schools as soon as you can do that safely. I think that's exactly what President Trump's opinion was, probably exactly what most of your opinions are. So we can say, okay, good so far. The Biden is pro-opening schools soon and safely. But he can't get it done. So what do? Well, what Biden is doing is he said, at least in his interview on CBS, he said that by Wednesday-ish, the CDC will have here's the fun part, science-based recommendations about how to open schools. So presumably it will say if you take the following precautions, science says it's safe enough to open up schools. So what happens when science, which Democrats love, I hear, they love their science. Everybody loves science, so it's dumb to imagine there's somebody who is anti-science. But that's what they say about Republicans. So Biden is setting up a situation in which his CDC will say scientifically it's okay to open up schools under these conditions, which most could meet. What happens then when the teachers' unions say no? Well, that will put the teachers' unions in a public disagreement with, wait for it, science. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Because Biden is a little bit handcuffed. His own party is so close to the unions, he can't stomp on a union, but he needs to. If you ask Biden privately, would you like to stomp on these unions and make them just agree to open up the schools with you safely? I'm pretty sure he'd say yes, if I could. If I had a way to stomp on them, I would, because it needs to be done. I believe he would agree with that statement. He would agree with most Republicans on that, and most people, most parents for sure. But he may have found a workaround. He may have found a workaround. We don't know yet, but setting up this public battle between science, as it will be presented by the CDC, and the schools that are supposed to teach science, as represented by the teachers' unions, right? Isn't that interesting? That is really, really good. If he does this right, and so far he's setting it up just right, that the news that's friendly to Biden, the news that propagandizes and brainwashes the public, what is the news going to do when Biden sets up teachers' unions are anti-science? What's the news going to do? It's pretty good. I think the news is going to have to back science, aren't they? How does CNN go against science when it's Biden science? They can't. I think he's created a situation in which he can use the public as a hammer and also use the news networks as a hammer against the teachers' unions. And I don't know that there was a better play than that. It's actually really good. So if I'm going to be honest, and we're dealing with technique and persuasion, not politics per se, just technique and persuasion, this is pretty good. Now we got to see if he can take it home, right? It's not good enough that he just puts it out there and then nothing happens. He's going to have to sit on this scientific recommendation, and he's going to have to pound it. But he could. He could do that. All right? I'm not going to rule him out. I'm not going to say he can't. I'm not going to say he won't until he tries. But if he lets this go, and the teacher unions just prevail after he's set it up, the science says this and they say that, well, that would be a pretty big failure, I think. I think once he's set it up that science is on the opposite side from the teachers' unions, he has to finish them, right? He can't wound the teachers' unions. He has to finish them off, at least on this topic, not completely. So we'll see if he's got the guts to do that. He might. We'll see. And if he does, I will praise him for it. So the news is saying, this is also something CBS said, Nora O'Donnell, said that at the current rate of vaccinations, it would take like a year to get 75% of people vaccinated, which might be what you need to stop the virus. Do you think that that tells you something? What should you think when somebody says at the current rate, it will take a year? How should you translate that in your mind? Should you translate it into your mind as it's going to take a year? You shouldn't. Because what you should translate in your mind is that there's a learning curve here, and it's a pretty big one. Meaning that on day one, you expect everything to go poorly because they've never done this before. On day two, they're fixing the problems they saw on day one. On day three, they're fixing the problems they saw on day two. So by the time you get, let's say, 6 months into this, your learning curve should have gone through the roof. And we're seeing now that Biden has been offered by, I guess the NFL offered all of their stadiums. Every football stadium has been offered as a mass vaccination place. All right, where did that come from? I mean, that just came out of nowhere, right? And it's because we needed it. So this is similar to the year 2000 bug, when all the experts were saying, at our current rate, there's no way we'll be able to reprogram the computers, they'll crash, and society will be damaged by a lack of computing for a while. But I said, no, you got it all wrong. The learning curve suggests that the last few months before the actual year 2000, our ability to reprogram things will be way better than you could even imagine back even just a few months ago. And what happened? Exactly that happened. A few months before the year 2000 bug would have been a giant problem, private industry figured out how to rapidly reprogram it. So they learned to do something quickly toward the end, which is the way you would normally expect these things to go. So here's my prediction. If they say that it would take a year at current rates, you could probably cut that in half. you could probably cut it in half, because we're probably a month away from really, really knowing what we're doing wrong and fixing it. And then the rate of vaccination should just start going straight up. That would be the normal thing to expect in a normal process of this type, where everyone wants the outcome and we're all working toward it. We just have to get rid of the wrinkles. And it looks like that's happening. Join me now for the unparalleled pleasure, the dopamine hit of the day, thing that makes everything better. It's called the Simultaneous Clip. Go.